Imagine living a life free of the feelings of shame and failure, regret and insignificance. Imagine not letting fear call the shots. We can instead live a life of power and purpose, one that helps us overcome our struggles and impacts those around us. Vertical pursuit is about helping others unlock their God-given potential and helps them move. Our goal is to inspire and empower you to gain the elevation between where you are and where God destined you to be. It's about living a life in response. This is a relational journey. We all long to belong and have a desire to be known. God never intended for us to overcome our greatest fears and struggles in isolation. It's about friendship with a purpose, a community of men who are part of a movement, a place where iron sharpens iron, and helps open the door to a life of value, worth, dignity, and character, free from the lies that haunt us and control us. It's about helping to change lives while our own lives are changed in the process. It's about leveraging what we have to leave behind a legacy. Join us as we journey together and discover the life we were created to live. Welcome into the Vertical Pursuit Podcast, Episode 1. This has been a long time in the making, and we'll explain, and I'll have Mike explain what vertical pursuit is. Mike Barrett, Mike Tatlock, and we're going to attempt to do something that we have talked about for a very long time, and we'll explain the why. We'll explain a little background about who we are, why we are doing this, and then to talk about what exactly vertical pursuit is. So firstly, Pastor Tatlock, he is a pastor, and he's an NBA team chaplain and a very good friend. Talk about what vertical pursuit is, and then we'll get into why the podcast, which is honestly, it's the hood ornament now, or maybe the last thing that puts the cap on what vertical pursuit is.
Well, totally. Well, you and I have been talking about this for a long time. And the podcast is finally an opportunity to really explore more of what vertical pursuit's about. And the whole idea of vertical pursuit, I mean, you think about the word vertical and you think about the word pursuit. And it's this idea that there's a faith component to all of this. You know, when Jesus showed up, he said, I've come that you have life to the full. So but when you ask yourself the question, am I living that? I mean, do I feel like my life has that? And so the idea of vertical pursuit is the fact that Jesus pursues us so that we would have life. He showed up and he found these young, lost folks, and he's like, hey, follow me. And it was this adventure, right? They called it discipleship. That's what they called it back in the day. And it was this, like, Jesus invited them into this adventure. And as they followed him, their life was transformed and they were changing the world. And when we're part of something like that, our life has meaning and purpose, it's significance. So the idea of vertical pursuit, it's pursuing God. That's the vertical, right? Pursuing him because he pursues us. And as we do that, our lives begin to move from just feeling ordinary to that idea of my life is extraordinary and I'm living for something. So that's kind of the idea behind the two words, vertical and pursuit.
And when we started talking about doing this a long time ago, the world was messed up and broken. That was a long time ago. Through 2-3 years. Right. Now, clearly, I mean, I think you said something last night. We were sitting by a fire at our friend Jim's house, kicking around all kinds of stuff, which is what we do, and which is what this is. And that's honestly how this was birthed. Exactly. We thought, gosh, we got to be rolling a camera because most guys are either alone or isolated or on an island or playing a video game or going through porn, or many of the other things were an escape. Exactly. Because men are so beaten down right now. Yep. And I don't mean to exclude ladies in this, because you're welcome as well to listen and take part. But one of the things we talked about was the need these days, and especially as isolated as people have been through the last couple of years, to now take a step back in. And you mentioned discipleship, and I always talk about fellowship. And,
Yep, exactly.
And there's friends that I have who I see and reach out to. I mean, and new friends once in a while I'll meet, and I'll tell my wife, he didn't have anybody in his life.
Yeah.
The power of that, and you talked about the original disciples and Jesus's guys, and how that all came to be, and nobody was perfect, and nobody was polished, and I like to think of this rough cut of guy that he found to follow him and to carry his message. And so these days, our pressure. The pressure on men now in terms of getting knocked down, and we've talked about this and how, say it however you want, masculinity under attack daily, and just men, I think, are tired, and therefore you run to what you see is a safe place.
Yep.
And I think the biggest thing for us now is to fellowship through this and to get to a point where you realize you got a squad, you got your team, you got your own discipleship group.
Right, exactly. But like one of the things we've talked about for years, we've talked about this, that the whole point of this podcast was that guys on the other end, whoever's on the other end, the audience, although unapologetically, this podcast is geared more to a male audience. There's a reason for that. And as a pastor for 27 years, I hear from women who are like, man, I would love for my husband to get the support. He needs help. He needs this. And so in a way, we're going to be speaking to a lot of men.
But the rooting section is going to be the wives.
Absolutely. The wives will be like, thank you for this.
Right.
There's nothing out there. And this is meant to be for men who are sitting there going, wherever you're at on the faith journey. This isn't guys who are like, man, I got it all figured out. In fact, I would say we understand a big part of the audience. There's men out there going, I don't know. I got a lot of questions. How does faith fit in this? And so I don't got it all figured out. This is for, when you think of Jesus, I love this. He got these guys together. You think of like Peter. Dude cut another guy's ear off with a sword. Yeah. You're like, that wasn't my last Tuesday. Like those are things that they just wrestled. These guys weren't perfect. And Jesus, even at one point, he looked at his disciples and said, you're my friends. And I think that's what men are missing today. That's why we say discipleship is friendship with purpose, because Jesus initiated a friendship, but there was purpose in that. Even Jesus in the darkest moment when he was going to the cross, I mean, the Bible tells us he was sweating blood. That's the anxiety he faced. He went to 3 of those disciples who were his closest friends, said, I need you in this moment. So I go, if Jesus needed friends to walk with him, how much more do we need that? And like you said earlier, we'll talk probably a little bit about more of this, what guys are facing and why there's an urgency for you and I that we've got to do this now. But I know we can be, before we get to that, I mean, we've been friends for a long time. And just talking through our friendship, the vision behind this, like tell us more, like what was the genesis behind the idea of doing this podcast? And I know a lot of it came out of you and I sitting with Jim around a fire and that friendship. But what, when you think of this, what's your like ambition and heart and vision and dream that you would see out of this?
Well, for those who don't know, and certainly if you're not local, you won't. I was an NBA broadcaster, play-by-play for a long time with the Portland Trailblazers, and our broadcast team was fired after the 16 season. It was out of the blue.
It was out of the blue.
For all of us. And, the conversations I remember right after all that happened and your world collapses and you're first thinking, okay, I guess we got to move. Yeah. And I did have some opportunities to do that. And then I thought, I've been tired of the travel for a long time. I've been tired of missing my kids and missing their events. The guys I saw around me who were doing this, and this is nothing, they're not all like this, but there are a lot of them that live for themselves. And I got to the point where I said, I can't do that anymore. So then you go, okay, how can I maintain a forum? How can I maintain influence? And what can I do with that that's positive? So believe it or not, we tried something like this, but it was a pilot for a Discovery show program. That's right. Dave Turin of Gold Rush fame, who we're going to have on this show probably multiple times. We got together, Jason Atkinson, former senator, ran for governor. Jason's a great guy, outdoorsman. We did do a show, and we did 3 episodes, and we did a pilot episode, and it was like this. It veered into the scripted reality a little bit,
Yeah.
which was not exactly. But Dave and I had talked about doing a podcast because he exited Gold Rush after this big fight. If people remember, I think it was after season 8.
Right, I remember it. Yeah.
He had this big on-camera fight. Now, not everything that happens on Gold Rush is real. This was. And a lot of hours in the car riding with Dave, hearing this story over and over again. That happened. So we both kind of were cast out and kind of going, what's next? And so we did originally talk about this. Anyway, long story short, obviously our show didn't get picked up by Discovery, or we pitched
It was awesome.
MGM.
Though.
It was cool.
The pilot was amazing.
It was cool. It was, and it was going to be a man-centric rescue type show.
Yeah.
Where you press into somebody for 3 days and
Yeah.
you go through this process and what comes out the other side.
Yeah.
So that was the idea of it. When that didn't work, I mean, when you have to reinvent yourself in your 50s, or I was just 50 then, I guess, you have to, number one, you would hope that it would be something that would come easy to you, that you're good at.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, you want to maintain influence, maintain a forum.
Yeah.
And then if you can do it in a way that is building up and helping people.
Yeah.
And I've always been a relational guy, and I love to press into people, and I don't beat them over the head right away if I know they don't have any faith.
Yeah.
I more like to model it, hopefully, and get them to the point where they go, God, it's something I want. And those friendships are something I want. And that team is something I want. So I think this is the next logical step. It took 4 years, or just about, but I'm excited about it. And, you talked about Jesus a moment ago, and you talked about his guys. And I love the Chosen series. And if you haven't watched the Chosen.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Because of, and my favorite scenes are when they are at a campsite, just dinging around. And you realize it was no different then than it is now.
Right.
We are going to have Dallas Jenkins, the executive
absolutely.
producer of The Chosen, on this podcast.
That's right.
Coming up soon. But I guess for all those reasons, it's a long answer to your question, which I'm famous for. But those are the reasons. And what I was going to say, too, is between the time I was canned by the Blazers and now, there have been things that I have no idea what I'm doing and what's this going to be. And the Lord has provided enough to survive. And it wasn't like I was a real rich guy anyway, but it's like you lean up and you start poking away at things. And I don't know how many, 8, 9, 10, and I'm involved in a bunch of things now.
Right.
But you look for the things that,
That's
like I
it.
said, are you're good at.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'm decent at stuff like this, or communicating at least. And then you go from there. But the friendship with you, and to see what you have done, even on the NBA front, as far as, because people don't see that. And I would love for them to see, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
And if there's things you can't, you tell me before, because I tend to just throw it all out there. But you've had a huge impact on that as well.
Well, and I think, like, even going back to that is, you and I have been friends for a lot of years, very close friends. And, we get together. In fact, last night we were doing it. We were sitting with Jim and sitting out with the fire. And that's, we talk about cohorts a lot.
No
right?
TV, nothing going on, just a fire and coyotes howling.
Exactly.
And just sitting.
Yeah, the stars outside.
And just sitting and then being known.
That's it.
Which is what you talk about.
And that's it right there, right? We talk about a place to be known. Because one of the things we say is everybody has that deep desire to be known. But our greatest fear is to be known and then rejected.
Yeah.
And so we're guarded, we're already feel defeated, we're insecure, we're beat down. And so takes so much risk to be known. And for years, we've sat around that fire and we just sit there, the three of us. And we start with highs and lows, like last night. What's the high? What's the low of the week? And we just get real. We get honest with each other. And I remember sitting there, it was maybe 2-3 years ago, and we go deep. We share everything. We're there with each other, That's true. And remember, Jim was like, "You guys, somebody needs to film you guys doing what you're doing right now.
This needs to be on film, or guys need to be encouraged to do this same thing," is what he would always talk about.
Yeah, because guys need to be. And we talk about guys again. And you brought up The Chosen. I'm reminded of one scene where they show Peter, and Jesus is basically recruiting Peter to be his disciple. And Peter's he's got trouble with the law. His issues going on in his life. And Jesus says, "Follow me." And it's going to be a big cost. And there's a scene where Peter goes home and talks to his wife. Now, we know that Peter had a wife because the Bible tells us he had a mother-in-law. And there's this scene that they capture so well where here's Peter looking at his wife saying, hey, Jesus is asking me to follow him, and it means I'm going to be gone a lot. And her response was, that's all I've ever wanted was a husband that's following Jesus.
Yeah.
And so again, it just kind of comes back to that men need something like this. There's not much out there, but it's going to bless a bigger audience. And I think sometimes when you try to be something for everybody, you're nothing for anyone.
That's exactly right. And so since this has turned into a Chosen recap for whatever reason, and I love that scene.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side of that, my favorites is episode 6 of season 1 when he's on the flip side telling Nicodemus who he is, and Nicodemus is accepting who he is and doesn't follow him.
I know.
And Jesus looks and says, "You came so close."
So
and he doesn't judge him. He just says, "I understand."
Yeah.
But it would have cost him too much because he was in a different position. So I guess what I'm chasing is those guys.
Yeah.
And I'll have those friendships come in where, and I have lots of friends like you do and lots of acquaintances, and you'll get to the guy and have a lunch or a breakfast and start to hang out with somebody, and then you realize this is going to be a tough nut to crack.
Yeah.
They probably have never had anybody ask them questions like this, and it's not comfortable for them.
Yeah.
And then others fall quickly.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we're doing what Jesus did by any means, but we're trying to do is model
That's right.
a format of friendship where you can be known and then accepted.
That's it. Even this podcast in a way is an invitation.
Yeah.
By us just being real and honest with each other and showing what we have, but inviting other guys into that and encouraging them. I mean, going back to, I'll never forget. I mean, I'm only involved in the NBA as a chaplain because of you. I mean, you were the one that initiated and key conversations with some of our good friends like Hersey Hawkins and Steve Blake and, guys that we were in relationship with. But you were the one that really teed that up. And so I'm only in there because of you. And,
but you killed it when you had the chance. So that's why you got in.
Well, I just go in where the Lord's called, but he used you to open that door. And I watched you in that arena. I mean, these are, when you look at behind the scenes in the NBA, any sports arena, everybody sees what they see on TV and they see, the games and the celebrities and all that. But man, it can be rough behind the scenes. Greed and money and power and who do I trust? And I saw you in an environment like a lot of people can relate to, the places they work and who do I trust? And, am I going to have a job? Am I going to have a contract this year? And the struggles but what I saw with you was that you were the big brother of the organization. I saw that everybody from all the way up to players and coaches and general managers, they all reached out to you and they said, Mike, and I think that's because you convey a genuine love and you have this ability to hold things with people, like you walk with them, and that builds trust. And I mean, even to this day, I still kind of am piggybacking on that legacy that you've had because the trust you had with them is the trust I came in on. And so in some ways, I'm stewarding that. But speaking of our friendship and the night that we were gathered again as friends, you remember that night we were at Brian's house and we were watching a movie one night, and you said you had an appointment the next morning.
I had a meeting.
And remember that night? Yeah. I mean, talk about that because that's a
you
reflection
and I and Brian and Steve Blake, and we were watching some war movie or something, which was what we
Band
did.
of Brothers. I think it was Band of Brothers.
Probably, and I needed that too. I didn't know how much until the next day.
Right.
But that you're talking about the night before.
Yeah,
I was
the
canned.
night before.
Yeah. Went in for a regular meeting, and they
which was
fired the staff
out of nowhere. I mean, you were at the top of the rankings, and what you were doing, you're so good at what your job was, and everybody loved you, and so I mean, it came out of nowhere.
It ironically came after a season when we had gotten some good attention, which we weren't after, but it came at a real weird time, and I remember getting. Well, that day was surreal because I hadn't even had a chance to call my parents, who were huge Blazer fans for life. And by the time I got to my truck, it was already on the radio. And then having to make all those calls or having people call me then to say, what in the world? Because it was so out of the blue. But, but I said, and I meant it, I didn't have bitterness about it. I never felt angry, heartbroken and lost and what now? But for me, that's not, what I do, and this is my own problem, and this isn't a good thing, I turn it inward and destroy myself. I beat myself up for stuff that maybe wasn't of my doing.
Right.
But what could I have done? And I surely must have brought this on, and this clearly wasn't that, and logically I can see that. That was really tough, but there were a whole bunch of things. I talked to you that day. I talked to a lot of friends, but I had two people in particular. One of them was Greg Thiem, who owns the Grill Center, the Traeger, and I still do the commercials for the Grill Center. And Greg showed up at my house with this. He had just grabbed some accessory. It was more symbolic than, and he wrote scripture all over the front of it. And his whole thing was, this is good. This is a great thing. And ironically, my brother-in-law, who's in Arizona, who's a phenomenal guy, he called me that day and said, this is great news. And I'm going, really? I mean, explain to me how this is great news. Yeah. And they did. And the thing that Greg said, he said, when something happens that's so, as you mentioned, out of the blue and unexpected, he said, that's a God thing. And I kind of went, and I understood it. Yeah. I mean, but I didn't really fully receive it. And I still think about that all the time. I probably don't tell him that as much as I probably should, because that was very helpful. Yeah. But I did get that at that time.
Right. But I think through life moments when we get blindsided, and I think that one was a blindsided moment. But the reason I bring it up is because I've got to watch you. You could have taken a road of, you could have drew a lot of attention to you that would have, gone a different path, but you didn't. You were a man of honor. You respected everybody. You took the high road. And, sometimes in these biggest challenges when we're blindsided, it always reveals someone's character and nature. But I got to see your faith walk that out. And I think part of friendship and discipleship is realizing that when we walk with each other through these hard things, that's the thing. There's a world of guys out there that are going through that. Guys are losing their jobs. Guys are, wives are cheating on them, or they found out they got cancer, or there's all these things that blindside them. And they're going, what do I do with that? How do I get my bearing on this? And not that we have it all figured out, but part of discipleship is that we're shaped in those times, but you got to walk with people through that. And watching you go through that and just seeing your character come out. And not that it's perfect, because there was lots of days of, okay, why did that happen and what's going on? And because you're human, right? And we got to be honest about these things on the podcast.
Yeah.
But I got to see that. And in a way, it shaped me too, because your struggle was my struggle. And I think that's what community and friendship is that that's why we use that word cohort, right? It's that military word that, someone on your left, someone on your right. But a lot of guys don't have that.
Yeah.
They don't have that.
No, you're right. And that's huge. And that's, I think, is what this is all about. And what we're going to do on the podcast is we're going to, because of our past, both of ours, and because of our networks, I started thinking, we were talking one day about guests to come on and share their view of this, their stories. And this is going to go a lot of different directions. And sometimes we're going to have on a Francis Chan, world-renowned pastor, leader, spiritual leader. Sometimes it's going to be a guy I think who maybe doesn't have a whole lot of faith in his life. Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. That's what this is going to be for. Right. And I haven't always modeled it perfectly, clearly. We're all broken and it's all messy. And there are success stories where, and like you have those too, where you push in on somebody and all of a sudden you get them, and all of a sudden they. And I don't want to say come to church, because that's not the most important thing all the time. It's resetting them.
That's it.
Into a life and shining the light of truth to where they can grab onto that. And I have guys in my life that I've done that with. I've had some that I've dropped off with and not done as good a job. But I think what we're trying to do is, and this sounds like, I always hesitate to make this sound like this is about us, but we are trying to get you to know us a little bit and to know where our hearts are in this. But I think it's to inspire and to show and to model. This is there. We know you're there. We see you.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
see your friends that way.
Yeah.
And things suck right now in a lot of ways, but shine some truth on it. Yeah. And it'll give you strength. I think that's the biggest thing.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm reminded, back when I lost my dad, and that was a blind side of my life. He was in a car accident, completely rocked my world, and 21-year-old guy. and married for 2 years, trying to figure out marriage and trying to figure out life and get the phone call. And it was the first time in life where I was just so pissed at God, because I'm like, my dad was a pastor, and it's that question we always ask: why do bad things happen to good people? It doesn't make sense. God, I don't understand why you would let this happen on your watch. And I remember just being so angry. But yet people would come up and say, God is good all the time, God is good. I'm like, yeah, God is good, but this situation's not. And I'm not really happy with God right now. I have a lot of questions, and I have a lot of anger. But I was in a small group, a cohort with 2 other guys at that time, first time in my life. One of the guys' name was Steve. I'll never forget. Came over to the house, and I was angry. I would go out and curse at God at night and yell at the sky. And it was the first person that ever told me, you can be honest with God. I've never heard anybody say that before. Mm-hmm. You can be, it's okay. God's a big boy. He can handle your anger. He'd rather you take that to him and be honest and vulnerable, because that's when we're honest with ourselves. So, but I needed someone in my life to help me do that. And that's why we keep coming back to, there's a lot of guys out there that we want to help speak to these things. We talk about loneliness, right? We talk about that. Like, guys are beat down now. Culture portrays men. I mean, think about that. Men are being portrayed. You watch it on Super Bowl ads, TV, sitcoms. The way that men are portrayed now, they're stupid, overweight. They're like junior high boys. They're irresponsible. They're bad guys. They're villains. I mean, just the way that men are just beat down in society.
And I heard Christian men called suckers this morning on a TV show.
Yeah.
The biggest suckers out there is what they said. So
there you go.
Yeah.
So we need to, this is about us being real and sharing our heart, but man, we want to provide hope. We want to provide inspiration, encouragement, and through all these things together, that it would just be a huge blessing to those on the other side of this.
So Pastor Tatlock has written a few books. How many?
2.
Okay. 2 books. Third one's coming out.
Third one is coming out. There's a manuscript. It's not published yet.
But he did write a book about vertical pursuit,
yeah,
which is what this podcast is called.
Yeah.
And there is a website. There is an Instagram handle, and now there is a podcast.
Yeah, and an app.
And so we are going to line these up. We are going to have great guests in. We're going to do some of these shoots on location at some crazy cool places. And we're taking a leap, and we want you to take it with us. So anything to add in closing of episode 1?
No, episode 1, it feels good to finally do it. We're actually saying that. Episode 1.
Exactly.
Oh, man, how many times have we talked about this? I would just say what you just echo that is, man, join the adventure, join the journey with us. And the resources are there. Check out the website, verticalpursuit.org. Get the app. It's a free app. There's a ton of resources on there, and get that today.
And this is on iTunes, Spotify,
Yep.
And I think you can link to it from the app as
Yep.
well.
It will be on the app as well, too.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. That was episode 1. Mike Tatlock, Mike Barrett. Thank you to Nick Livingston and Red Anchor Society and David Ward, Colton Myers, and we will see you next time for episode 2 of the Vertical Pursuit podcast.
Yeah.
We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.